57 channels and nothing on. Anybody remember that song? It's about a man who buys an expensive house, and he buys himself a new TV, and he orders cable, and then he spends all night flipping channels, and he can't find anything that he likes. And at the time that song came out, I think we had cable at our house growing up, but I think we had 30 channels, and so I heard that song, and I was, he's got 57 channels, lucky. I was kind of jealous of him. Jamie and I, a couple years ago, we had cable, and we actually dumped cable because we figured out that we were paying $100 a month for the same 2 channels, and we didn't really watch all that much of it, and so we dumped it. But don't think that we suffer, like we don't have anything to watch now, because we still have Netflix, and we have an Amazon subscription, so that means we get Prime Video as well, and we have lots of things we can watch on Pluto. We watch that app sometimes, and so now we don't have 57 channels. We have literally hundreds of thousands of options available to us at any time, and there's still nothing on. But that song I referred to is thought to kind of be a metaphor for the emptiness of our consumer culture. And I think that what Bruce Springsteen says in that song has a lot to do with what Solomon says in today's passage. If you'll turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, we are in our 3rd week of our walk through this book in Ecclesiastes, trying to find meaning in Ecclesiastes. We're looking at verses 1 through 11 this morning. I said to myself, "Come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good." But that also proved to be meaningless. "Laughter," I said, "is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish?" I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves that were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers, and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So we kind of skipped over a passage at the end of chapter 1. We're going to get to that next week because it kind of speaks similarly in 2 different passages. of drunkenness and how it doesn't lead to anything good. But here in Ecclesiastes, he either learned this later after he wrote Ecclesiastes, or after he tried to embrace a party lifestyle, or he went back on what he knew to be true because he was desperate for entertainment. I'm not sure. But he says he gave himself to folly, to wild living. Because he wanted to see, will this give me any satisfaction? They recognize that God is the source of every good and perfect gift. We see it over and over again. We don't see it in Ecclesiastes. We don't see it in the Proverbs. That's because there's only one place that joy comes from. It's a relationship with God. And as we talked about, a relationship with God is what Solomon had squandered. He started strong, then his heart was led astray by a lot of other things, and so he has no joy because he has no relationship with God. Blaise Pascal said this, 17th century philosopher. We can go to the next slide. He said this, you may have heard this before, right? There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of each man which cannot be satisfied by any created thing, but only by God the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ. You talk about that God-shaped hole that's in us. The truth is, we try to gain meaning we try to gain pleasure from entertainment, from things, but they can't provide us with that because they're not designed to. Why? Because there's a God-shaped hole, and only God can fill that hole. Only Christ can give us joy. So, what is joy? Go to the next slide. It tells us a few things. We're not going to do a long sermon on joy today, but a few things about it that we can look at. Well, first of all, we know in the New Testament that joy is a fruit of the Spirit, right? And that means, and I've talked about this before, the fruit of the Spirit doesn't mean like, if I have no joy in my life, do I really need to work on being more joyful? No, you need to work on being more connected to the Spirit because it's a fruit of the Spirit. If the Spirit is working in your life, if you're living by the power of the Holy Spirit, joy is a byproduct that comes from that because of your connection to God and your realization of what Jesus has done for you. Joy is a fruit of the Spirit. A second thing about joy is it is sustained in times of difficulty. In other words, it is not dependent on circumstance. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, there's a difference between happiness and joy. I love eating cereal for breakfast, but I don't eat cereal for breakfast very often. There's a reason for that. My favorite cereal is Cocoa Pebbles. I could eat an entire box of Cocoa Pebbles in one sitting, but I don't. You know why? Because when I eat Cocoa Pebbles for breakfast, I'm hungry again after an hour, and then I spend the entire morning snacking until I get to lunch, and I don't need that. Why? Because Cocoa Pebbles is pure sugar. That's why it's so amazing. There's no protein in it. If you want your to be satisfied until the next meal, you need some protein. See, happiness is kind of like Cocoa Pebbles. Happiness is like sugar. We're happy for a moment because of our circumstances. That's what happiness is based on most of the time. It's an emotion, and right now I feel happy, and I can be singing in my car. Somebody cuts me off. I'm not happy anymore. They're away. Joy is not happiness. Joy is different. Joy is different. Because it's not dependent on what's happening to me right now. It's grounded in the truth of what Jesus Christ has done for me. That third point, that's the important one. It's not based on my circumstances or how things are going today. It's based on a reality that is true, whether or not somebody cuts me off in traffic, whether or not I get a bill that's higher than I expected, whether or not my car breaks down on the freeway. The reality is Jesus Christ has freed me from sin. That's true in every circumstance. Jesus Christ overcame death for me. Jesus Christ gives me the promise of eternal life. He has given me His Spirit to sustain me as a down payment on the salvation that I will one day receive, and He is with me at all times. And that truth does not change based on what I'm struggling with today. And although I will be honest with you, I am often not has this kind of enchanting power which she throws into a fire, and it has this intoxicating effect, and it confuses them. And she's playing on this little harp thing. And she's trying to convince them in this kind of magical spell. She's trying to convince them that her dark, damp kingdom is all that there is. That there is no Narnia, that there is no sun. Narnia is a fantasy that you have imagined. My world is the only world. There is no sun. There are no trees. This is all there is. And Puddleglum, in a moment of clarity, he stomps out the fire that's kind of keeping them intoxicated, and he does this incredible speech that I've always loved. He says, "One word, ma'am," coming back from the fire, limping because of the pain. "One word. All you've been saying is quite right, I shouldn't wonder. I'm a chap who always likes to know the worst and then put the best face I can on it, so I won't deny any of what you said. But there's one more thing to be said, even so. Suppose we have only dreamed or made up all those things. Trees and grass and sun and moon and stars and Aslan himself. Suppose we have. Then all I can say is that, in that case, the made-up things seem quite a deal more important than the real ones. Suppose this black pit of a kingdom of yours is the only world. Well, it strikes me as a pretty poor one. And that's a funny thing when you come to think of it. We're just babies making up a game, if you're right. But 4 babies playing a game can make a play world which licks your real world hollow. That's why I'm going to stand by the play world. I'm on Aslan's side, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live like a Narnian, even if there isn't any Narnia. So thanking you kindly for our supper, if these 2 gentlemen and the young lady are ready, we're leaving your court at once and setting out in the dark to spend our lives looking for the overland. I love that. I'm going to live like a Narnian even if there is no Narnia. The world tries to say, no, the world is what, this is the fun stuff, do all of this. I'm going to live like a Christian even if you were right and Jesus wasn't real. But he is real. Because what he offers is far better than what the world offers. Our entertainment culture enchants us with push notifications, with streaming content, new cars, bigger houses, and we're tempted to think, yeah, this is what life's all about. This is all there is. There's nothing greater than this. And the message is we need to not listen to that message. But brothers and sisters, it's going to get harder and harder not to as time goes on. We can go to our last slide. Isn't she cute? Little girl at the beach, picking up seashells. Here's the thing. She isn't real. tempts us